The votes in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas have been counted. The March 3rd primaries are over. Kind of. Texas will have some runoff elections, which will take place on May 26th. In today's chat, we'll review the primary results for each of those states. Due to time, I won't be able to do a deep dive into every race that happened, but there are several important lessons to be learned from these results. With 47 states remaining in our primary process, we need to continue working to flip as many congressional seats as possible, from fascists and corporatists to people who will represent everybody, fighting for equal human rights. As a quick reminder, on Tuesday, March 10th, Mississippi will have their primary. Sadly, they didn't have any candidates who inspired me or met the secular lefty requirements. I don't have all available information though, and I also rely heavily on their online presence. If they don't have a website, social media, or a YouTube channel, candidates who don't utilize those options limit their ability to inform more potential voters about their campaigns. Candidates need to tell voters what they believe in, what policies they fight for, and why they are the best candidates to be elected. Of course, those who don't put in writing or say clearly what they are fighting for are exactly the kinds of politicians we need to stop electing in the primaries. That following Tuesday, on March 17th, Illinois will have their primary. They have several fantastic secular lefty approved candidates, but I won't go over everything again here. Go check out my video on the Illinois primary if you have not done so yet to learn more. Going into these elections, my research concluded that 29 candidates running in the available 59 seats had met the requirements to be a secular lefty approved candidate. If you are new to this channel, or perhaps didn't see this information before, here are those requirements to be secular lefty approved. In the immediate, I want every candidate discussing Trump's crimes, the crimes of those in his administration, and the terrorism caused by the ICE Gestapo. Trump should have been impeached months ago, yet the majority of the 119th Congress has remained spineless and complicit. If they won't impeach, then we need to elect a brand new Congress who will. One quick related point I want to make here as well. When discussing impeachment, there's often pushback with arguments like, the Senate won't convict, why bother? Or even if Trump is impeached, then he won't leave and it creates a constitutional crisis. And there are more, but I want to address these 2 points. For every sitting member of Congress when they took office, if every one of them actually believed in the oath they swore to uphold the U.S. Constitution, they would have impeached Trump no later than February in 2025, after his actions during his first week in office. His executive orders and the actions of Doge were clear violations of the separations of power between the executive and the legislative branches. Additionally, he had violated various emoluments clauses. His crypto scam coin he launched a few days before taking office. A complete disgrace. Wanting our Congress members to uphold their oath and impeach Trump is not about partisan politics or politics in general. This is a question of how many millions of people around the world will die as a result of this child-raping fascist trying to distract from the Epstein files. We have witnessed the devastation and death throughout 2025, and now with the Epstein war destroying the whole Middle East and spiraling out of control. This is a direct result of the spineless inactions of our current Congress, the majority of them failing to uphold their oaths to a constitution which itself, the rule of law, and human rights are all on hiatus and have been for over a year now. On the second point, Trump causing a constitutional crisis, he has been his whole second term. He tried to on January 6, 2021, and from that, we knew he had no intention of leaving office willingly. Best case scenario, he drops dead soon from one too many Big Macs, and most likely JD Vance is a failed president for the remaining time in office. In either scenario, whether Trump lives throughout the term or JD Vance takes over, Republicans are still going to do everything they can to rig the midterms. Whether Trump and the fascists try to cancel the midterms, invalidate the results, not sit the newly elected Congress, doesn't leave office if impeached, or doesn't leave office if he loses in the 2028 election, every one of those actions is Trump creating the constitutional crisis. Just because Trump and the fascists are hell-bent on creating a white supremacist, Christian nationalist, techno-feudal hellscape doesn't mean we let them. It's going to take various efforts by millions of Americans to get us out of this robber baron fascist shithole country period right now. While federal elections are still controlled at the state and local levels, electing the best congressional candidates ready to meet this moment is, in my opinion, our best and only nonviolent path forward right now. A general strike would also be ideal, but with millions of Americans one paycheck or less away from being homeless, that makes that a very difficult task to organize around as well. So with that, that's why I'm doing these video projects covering the 2026 primaries. Let's now get back to the primary results. Of the 29 approved candidates, at least 13 of them, around 45%, will be moving on to the general election. In Texas, there are 3 runoff elections in the 5th, 18th, and 24th districts with approved candidates, which we will discuss more later in the video. If they all win, then we could have up to 16 victories out of the 29, or 55%. Of course, to keep it in perspective, I also have the percentage breakdown out of the total number of seats, which would be 22 to 27%, again depending on those runoff results. As these primaries are completed, it's going to be interesting to see how these percentages change over time. To get over 100 members or more in office who will fight for impeachment, that means having a percentage of around 19% or higher. Right now, we're at a minimum of 22. So I would say things are looking okay at this moment. But as we discuss some of these races in more detail, we'll see that the outcomes could have been much better. Starting with some very positive news, both secular lefty approved candidates in Arkansas are moving on to the general election in November. Rob Ryerson in the 3rd and James Russell in the 4th. These results are from the NBC News website, and I'll also be sharing some numbers from the Ballotpedia site as well later on. Now, Rob was running unopposed and thus a guaranteed win. Watching the results come in on Tuesday for James, though, it was very close throughout much of the night I was able to watch it. The vote count was often within 300 votes or less. And by the end, James had won with 53% of the vote, ahead by about 1,500 votes in total. Several of these vote totals we'll discuss are very close, and it's why voter participation matters, and more importantly, in these primary elections. A helping factor for other candidates down ballot is when there is an exciting statewide candidate running. Now, while we are currently not in a presidential year, that is usually when voter turnout is the highest in this country, a bad American habit. In the midterms, though, 35 states have a U.S. Senator up for election. In the U.S. Senate race for Arkansas, neither candidate met my criteria listed earlier. Looking at the results, Haley Schaffner either ran a good enough campaign to earn 78% of the vote or had enough money to buy ads. I'm not sure which. But here's an important piece of information to keep in mind as we review these results in other states. There were around 130,000 votes in the Democratic Senate primary. The Republican incumbent, Tom Cotton, a supporter of Trump's crimes and the destruction of the Middle East, taking AIPAC money and countless other corporate PAC money, he earned 230,000 votes alone, a full 100,000 more and another 50,000 Republican votes for the other 2 candidates. It's not impossible for the Democratic candidates to win, but they will have to make their case why they are the better candidates to represent the people in Arkansas. They have all the evidence to do that, but if it isn't used, if the Senate candidate Haley Schaffner runs a typical Republican-light, moderate centrist campaign, she will lose. She will not inspire voters for herself or other down-ballot races. What I would hope for is that Haley speaks with Rob and James. Bring in the other 2 candidates in the 1st and 2nd districts and work on a unifying message. Explain to the voters in Arkansas how Tom Cotton and the Republicans are making our lives more expensive. The tariffs, the new forever war no one wanted. Tell each and every person on the campaign trail you will impeach Trump and hold these criminals accountable. Tell them how afterwards you will work with other Congress members to address the affordability crisis in this country. That is the winning strategy. But if Arkansas does consist of too many voters stuck in the Trump cult, then all we can do is hope for the best, but also look to the many other races in this country and see where else we can help. Moving on to North Carolina, a state with 14 House districts and 1 Senate seat. The night started off good. Kimberly Hardy in the 7th was running unopposed, so we had at least 1 victory. Ashley Bell in the 10th had a very impressive turnout for her campaign. Out of 6 candidates, she earned 47.3% of the vote. As a reminder, North Carolina is a state that uses a plurality-style system, so only 30% or more of the vote is required to win in the primary. Now, I don't know everything about Ashley Bell or her campaign, but what these results tell me is she put in the work to earn those votes in her district. Likewise, another candidate that put in the hard work and won is Richard Ojeda in the 9th District. In previous videos, I have mentioned that I've been aware of Ojeda's political career since 2018, and seeing him win this primary provided me some much additional joy. Unfortunately, that is where the success ends in North Carolina, for now. So 3 wins out of 8, not terrible, but here are the losses. In the Senate, I found Justin Dew's campaign page, and the policies he focused on made him the best candidate. Unfortunately, it would appear that the overwhelming majority of North Carolina Democratic primary voters prefer the 68-year-old former governor liberal Roy Cooper. I do have to admit and point out what is important to note here is the enthusiasm for the Democratic candidates versus the Republicans in the U.S. Senate race. Over 750,000 people voted for Roy, while only a little over 500,000 votes went to the Republican candidates. Roy Cooper may not be the best candidate, in my opinion, but that Senate seat flipping from a Republican to Roy Cooper would still be a victory, as long as he supports impeachment efforts. Considering he has no policies on his webpage, I don't know what he stands for or what he fights for. There are some third-party options, but until recently, none of those candidates really inspired me. But what happened is, there's a recent video going around. It's from a Senate Armed Services Subcommittee that took place on March 4th. In the video, here is North Carolina Senate candidate Brian McGinnis, who is running as the Green Party candidate. He is a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, and during this hearing, he has a very important message for those on the subcommittee. I'll now show you how the Capitol Police decided to respond to that message, and for some reason also Senator Tim Sheehy of Montana also decided to get involved in the violence. And before playing this clip, a full warning, there is the graphic sound of a bone being broken. If you don't want to see or hear that, it happens around 50 seconds into the video. The full video is 5.5 minutes. The link will be in the description down below. But here's the first full minute.
Israel is the reason for this war. America does not want to fight this war for Israel. Let's go. Come on, let's go. America does not want to send its sons and daughters to war for Israel. Your inability to name that shows you have left this as leaders. Out. This is wrong. Stop. And nobody wants to fight for Israel.
A reminder to all of our
Commandant, please stand up as a Marine and stand up for America. Out. No one wants to fight for Israel. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Sir, thank you for your service.
The senator broke his hand.
The senator broke his hand.
Please help him.
He's a Marine. Somebody come help him.
Control your Senate committee.
Look at you guys. You're robots.
A U.S. senator.
You won't even look back. Look.
That sound of his arm being snapped will haunt me for a while. Here's a veteran using only his First Amendment right. He was expressing his disgust in our decision to help Israel with this Epstein war to destabilize the whole Middle East in the interest of Israeli expansion of the region. Additionally, Trump is using this war to continue to distract from his other crimes in the Epstein files, and to possibly try and give himself emergency war powers and shut down the midterm elections. Police brutality is not something new in this country, but it is sure increasing with more escalating examples. People are dying in ICE concentration camps or being murdered out in the streets. And now, here we have Capitol Police and a sitting U.S. Senator breaking the arm of a veteran, a firefighter, a patriot for speaking out against Israel and trying to stop more Americans from dying in this unnecessary and wasteful war. As I've said, he is also the Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. As a Green candidate, 3 main pillars of their policy platform is Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, and rejecting all corporate PAC money. Green candidates will in most cases align with my secular lefty approved requirements. The only question then becomes in the general election, what about vote splitting? I've already mentioned Anthony Aguilar running in North Carolina's 13th district in their primary review video. I still say he is the best candidate in that race and should be supported in the general election. Likewise, there is a third Green Party candidate, Michael Dublin, who is running in North Carolina's 2nd district. Considering that the AIPAC Dem, who was an incumbent, ran unopposed in that district, yes, go support Michael Dublin in the general election. What becomes a slightly more difficult conversation is the one for Senate. After seeing McGinnis speak up against this war, if I lived in North Carolina, he would have my support and I would vote for him. And I would hope more voters in North Carolina decide to do that. Now, yes, Roy Cooper won the Democratic nomination by an impressive margin. But how much of that was by name recognition for the former governor or legitimate excitement for his current campaign? Right now, the seat is currently held by a Republican. Worst case scenario, it stays that way, which again, I understand, it's not ideal right now. But 68-year-old liberal Roy Cooper is not entitled to the seat either, just because he won the Democratic primary. If he wants that seat, then he will have to earn it campaigning on the policies we need. Otherwise, Brian McGinnis is the better candidate to support in the November general election. At the very least, each of those candidates have an equal right to explain their case. Hoping for a quick recovery for McGinnis's broken arm, this article from March 7th was the most recent information I could find on his current whereabouts and condition. Link will be down below to read more if interested. Let's now discuss the remaining North Carolina races. Kate Barr, our progressive Republican in the 14th district, was sadly unable to win against MAGA incumbent Tim Moore. Kia Creekmore in the 5th and Keith Davenport in the 6th were also unable to win their races. The most devastating loss in North Carolina happened in the 4th district. When I checked back on the results Wednesday, March 4th, the winner had still not yet been called for the 4th district. With 99.1% of the vote reporting, Nadal Alam was trailing the geriatric AIPAC money-taking incumbent by 1,200 votes, or around 1%. I was hoping this would at least go to a recount. Sadly, on Thursday, March 5th, Nadal Alam did concede to Valerie Foushee. This loss hurts because of just how good a candidate Nadal Alam is, and how she would have been a great congresswoman. But this also hurts because when you dig a little more into what happened in this district, what happened behind the scenes, the answers, they lead back to a larger problem in U.S. politics and what makes grassroots campaigns so difficult to break through in elections with incumbents. Here's a clip from Breaking Points where Ryan Grimm explains how much help Valerie Foushee needed to defeat Nadal Alam's progressive campaign.
I think every House Democrat is going to look at that and be like, I don't want to have to run for just my party's nomination and have to deal with something like that.
Yeah, and Dave, not every Democrat can get the kind of help that she got from, and particularly from HAKEEM Jeffries. So he put her within days of this, in days of Nadal Alam launching her campaign, he put her on this 3-person Democratic task force to write AI policy. And what that is that is a giant signal to the AI industry that you need to shower money on this person. The others are Ted Lieu and Josh Gottheimer, like both voracious fundraisers, Gottheimer in particular. And so they did. They came in 1.6 million at last counting. I bet when we get the final numbers, it'll be higher. It was Anthropic's coalition of AI. So it's the AI safety people, the good guys. But so he did that, and then there was also this PAC that he's connected to that raised money from AIPAC, moved it through a separate PAC so that it was called Article 1 PAC, so that she could abide by her promise to not take any more APAC monies. But Jeffries can't do that for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe he can. Can he? So
I already didn't like HAKEEM Jeffries. A spineless, corrupt, centrist establishment dipshit. A puppet for APAC, the military-industrial complex, and any other large money donor. He is complicit in Trump's fascism and war crimes. For those reasons, I was already willing to help any primary challenger of HAKEEM Jeffries in New York's 8th District. Now, this dipshit has just made it my priority to include a 1 to 2 minute advertisement for his primary challenger, Vance Bostic, in every episode from now until New York's primary on June 23rd. If you want to see HAKEEM Jeffries lose his primary like I do, then there is only one candidate declared running against him. Vance Bostic is a worker who has lived through economic hardship. He is a progressive, secular lefty-approved candidate ready to fight the establishment, impeach Trump, and hold the criminals accountable for their crimes. If you live in the 8th District of New York, or anywhere in New York, right now those candidates need signatures to make the primary election ballot. Help with those signatures if you can, and check out his campaign page. Consider supporting Vance Bostic to oust HAKEEM Jeffries in the New York primary happening on June 23rd. HAKEEM may have ended Nadal Alam's chances in North Carolina's 4th District. Now let's help end his career on June 23rd. Support Vance Bostic. Let's now finish up with the results from Texas. I was hopeful the people in Texas would support 19 candidates. At the moment, we have incomplete information, as several districts require runoff elections. This includes 3 districts with approved candidates: Chelsey Hockett in the 5th District, Christian Menefee in the 18th, and Kevin Burge in the 24th. It is in the 18th District that I am once again finding myself annoyed at Representative Al Green. Again, I like Al. He has been a constantly good representative in Congress and was the one who brought forth articles of impeachment against Trump the first time in June 2025. However, Al, you are 78 years old. Christian Menefee just won this district in a special election runoff. Now you're making Menefee go through another runoff. Al, I would rather you weren't hell-bent on dropping dead in Congress. However, the voters in Texas's 18th District will have to vote again to decide in the May 26 runoff election. There is an additional runoff election I want to mention, which is in the 35th District. Sadly, my approved candidate, Whitney Masterson-Moyes, did not earn enough votes to go into the runoff. However, candidate Maureen Galindo, who is a Citizens Impeachment Courage candidate, is in the runoff. Maureen Galindo, therefore, is also secular lefty approved. Texas voters in those districts, go support those candidates in the May 26 runoff election. The candidates who were not fortunate enough to win their elections has been 8 so far. They include Regina Vanberg in the 21st, Greta Lank in the 23rd, Ricardo Villarreal in the 28th, Anthony Bridges in the 32nd, Zishan Hafiz in the 33rd, Etienne Rosas in the 34th District, and Teresa Courts in the 38th. It's in the 33rd District that I was most disappointed by the voters of Texas. You had a really great choice with Zishan Hafiz, but instead of supporting Zishan and getting him to at least in the runoff election, the majority of the voters decided to put the top 2 APAC-funded candidates into the general election. Very disappointing. Moving on to a more positive note and discussing those who did win their primaries in Texas. In the 4th, we had Jason Pierce, Danny Minton, who was unopposed in the 6th District, Claire Reynolds won her race in the 11th District, Mark Nair won in the 13th, he was also unopposed, Tanya Lloyd won the 27th District, Justice Democrat-backed candidate Frederick Haynes III won in the 30th District, Justin Early won in the 31st, and lastly, Greg Kaiser, the incumbent, he was originally in the 35th District, but because of redistricting, so he still won his primary and will be running off in the general election for the 37th District. Also, a shout out to the winner in the 3rd District, Citizens Impeachment Courage candidate Evan Hunt. So depending on how these runoff elections go, we could have at least 9 secular lefty-approved candidates going into the general, or as many as 13. While more wins would have been preferred, that is no reason to not be grateful for the victories that were made. These are the steps in the right direction. As for my thoughts on James Tallarico and the Senate primary, I didn't pick either James Tallarico or Jasmine Crockett as an approved candidate because neither felt they authentically met the requirements. I like how Jasmine has been yelling at Republicans in the past in Congress, but that's not enough, and she ran a terrible campaign. Little on policy, an empty campaign. James, on the other hand, I didn't care for all the Christian stuff he was doing. But towards the end of his campaign, he did start discussing more about wealth inequality and naming the billionaires as the problem. As long as James Tallarico continues that rhetoric, and I would hope expands it further to include impeaching Trump, abolishing ICE, and military spending, and Medicare for all, then I could see him winning the U.S. Senate seat in Texas, but we'll see. The Democrats had great voter turnout in the primary. Hopefully that will continue into the general election. The Progressive Democratic Tea Party has begun, and we are starting to see some wins. We can't stop now. We must continue to educate ourselves, our family, our friends, inform them that there are good candidates worth supporting out there. Things won't improve if we don't put in the work, and there's lots of work to be done. Final reminders. March 10th is the Mississippi primary, and on the 17th is Illinois. Vote for the secular lefty approved candidates, or any candidate endorsed by the secular lefty approved groups. We have discussed some of them before, but if you're not familiar with Progressive Victory, PALPAC, Sunrise Movement, and the Working Families Party, these are all additional groups to rely on when researching candidates to support. The next states to be covered in the 2026 primary election analysis series are Indiana and Ohio. I hope to have those videos done before the end of March. Thank you again to everyone for your support, the comments, and sharing the videos. Currently, I can only focus on these projects part-time. To make it my full-time priority, please consider supporting me on my Patreon. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and thank you for listening. Take care.